I should say that I'm absolutely thrilled to have been elected the 9th president of Clare Hall. And some of you will know my wife, Slane Campbell, who's hugely looking forward to joining me here, with our daughter Georgia, who's a keen classicist. You'll not be surprised to hear that it was a grueling and exhaustive election which took 14 months in the end, managed by the senior fellow, Charles Smith, who you will know as a senior Cavendish professor. The fellows eventually edited the many hopeful applicants down to a short list of a mere 9 candidates, and their final meeting, incarcerated here in the Richard Eaton Suite, lasted 10 hours, fueled by excellent refreshments provided by Luigi and his colleagues from the kitchens. Elections for head of house in Oxford and Cambridge are legendary rituals conducted under tight security. If you're interested in the process, I do commend C.P. Snow's novel, The Masters, an entirely fictional account, Lord Snow tells us, which coincidentally mirrors almost exactly the unfolding of the 1937 mastership election at Christ's College here, his college. It forms an excellent manual for aspirants to mastership, and I read it and reread it continuously through the 14 months, much to the huge amusement of my daughter. I was elected a professorial fellow of Clare Hall in 2002 on being elected the 5th professor of architecture in the university. I had my collar felt by Stefan Collini, who recruited me at a vice-chancellor's dinner for heads of department. I remember this dinner very well because the VC was in a truly filthy mood and it was a grim 3 hours. But I knew Clare Hall well because as a second and third year undergraduate at Trinity 40 years ago, my director of studies assigned me to the Clare Hall fellow, Ron Lucock, who many of you will know, the polymathic architectural historian who had a very nice office in the courtyard, which I think is now Marie's office. I would trudge up the long alleyway across the backs from Trinity at perhaps then its all-male, malodorous bleakest in the late 1970s, and I entered into a bright and stylish future as I climbed the steps from Herschel Road into Clare Hall. And I came to love Ralph Erskine's new college building so much that I carefully drew them all out as a 3-dimensional isometric drawing. It's an incredibly clever composition, and Ron Lucock showed me how fellows lived an idyllic life in it, gently moving up the different floor levels from their studies to the intermediate level for reading the newspapers and the TLS with a coffee and a cigarette, and then climbing a few steps more to a bar and a fabulous lunch before attempting the slow descent to reverse the process. Life indeed, as it should be lived. After my degree here, I went on to Harvard and fell under the influence of the maverick historian of modernism, William Curtis, who's become a great friend now as a former Slade lecturer here. He reminded me 2 weeks ago that I gave a talk about Clare Hall in 1978 in Le Corbusier's Carpenter Center at Harvard, and then again in the Great Hall at MIT. And I persuaded William, a natural brutalist, Dennis Lasden's biographer, no less, to include Clare Hall in his iconic history of 20th century architecture. And he is now hugely enjoying spinning the fantasy that I had been predestined for the role for 40 years or more, and now heads his emails to me, not without irony, and slightly annoyingly, Alan Short of Clare Hall. Well, for the last 2 years, I've been the vice president, and so I've been very close to the complex mechanism of the college and Clare Hall society. In a Cambridge college, the role of vice master, vice provost, or vice president is traditionally very nuanced and subtle. Some years ago, Sir Roger Tomkis, the then master of Pembroke, invited me to accompany him to Bahrain. I still don't know why, but as we waited for many hours in very smart hotel lobbies for various grandees to meet us, he talked at length about his 2 terms as master, the second then coming to a conclusion. He said that he had achieved nothing that he originally set out in his election address, and that the fellowship had imperceptibly sabotaged every initiative for change through its embodiment in the physical form of the vice master. I reflected on this when I was elected vice president here and decided not to follow that tack. And now, I'm in my closing moments as Vice President and about to change horses. And I welcome the Fellows' excellent choice of Helen Pennant as their Vice President. I hugely look forward to working with her in the thoroughly un-Old Oxbridge way, and her election is really my first lucky break as incoming President. I said to the electors at my final interview that we should all remember that for many of our academic members, being here is the culmination of a life's dream, and it will probably change their future lives, just as it changed mine, very much for the better. So the core of my vision is to build the experience of every member of our college society so that it is the very best in any academic institution, and that should drive every decision we make. It's as simple as that. And it seems to me that Clare Hall's capacity for interdisciplinarity is absolutely fundamental to the idea of the college. And one can see it coming into being across the tables at lunch and dinner, and on the new sofas in the common room. It certainly worked for me. 2 large projects have grown here out of those conversations. And those of us who are implicated in the REF, the UK's quinquennial research audit, hear a lot about it. It's much sought after, but elusive, particularly here in Cambridge, it turns out. And if it's going to prosper anywhere, it's here in Clare Hall. For the graduate students, we want this to be overwhelmingly the college of first choice and to be known as such worldwide. It's difficult being a graduate student, much more so than in my time. It's expensive, stressful, can be lonely, never so much as through the last few months of lockdown. Expectations are infinite, but all sorts of things can go wrong, of course. The containable size of Clare Hall is a huge help, and the dedication of our really excellent tutorial team guarantees close support for every student, and they need our continuing help. So we want to give them the richest, most stimulating, most supportive, confidence-boosting time of their lives, building self-esteem that will propel them through their careers. And I know how powerful that can be as a former scholar and then a graduate of Trinity College. Trinity does this very well, and it elicits fantastic loyalty. And we do this here too, but without the Tudor bumptiousness. A lot of our fundraising is oriented towards buildings and interiors. There's a building of 30 student rooms to build at 4 Herschel Road. It would enable all of our first-year students to live in college. And I know from the matriculation events that those students who are unlucky in the ballot were heartbroken not to have the authentic Cambridge experience of living in college after all the huge effort to get here. So that's an important project. And all of our important gatherings happen in other colleges' theatres and university lecture rooms. And I proposed during the election that we desperately need our own auditorium, a really beautiful room with a fantastic acoustic, which would quickly become revered as a legendary place for music, in which we can also stage our important annual lectures. And in my time, I've designed 3 theatres and 11 auditoria, I counted up, over the last 30 years. And I've been drawing one for Clare Hall, the best yet, I would say, through the lockdown, with lots of advice from musicians and acousticians, and I look forward to presenting it to you all when we've got considerably further proving it. We'll need a very generous angel or 2, but it should earn the college a good revenue if it happens. And there are more modest schemes, which might be highly impactful for all college members. We have the chance now to recover Erskine's delightful unbuilt designs for all the external courtyards and routes through the college, revived by one of his most trusted former assistants and disciples, from Erskine's archived drawings in Stockholm. And this is a life-enhancing scheme which reintroduces water and planting and makes sitting places outside the barn and the dining hall courtyard, which might almost double the hall's capacity on a warm evening. People are at the centre of all Ralph's proposals. I think it would make a huge difference, and we should do this if we possibly can. And the refurbishing of the common room has led to much more intense use. People work in it now, a lot. But it's not finished yet. It needs the sparkle of lamps for reading, vases full of cut flowers. Erskine had ashtrays everywhere, I remember those a long time ago, and rugs and mats to relieve the floor plane, all to reinforce the atmosphere. And then we should move on to the dining hall. Famous acoustician has shown us how to cure the acoustic. Thick, full-length curtains will be part of the answer. And our colleague John Barrow, who many of you will know well, has chosen a fabulous 1941 Swedish textile pattern by Joseph Frank, late of the Bauhaus, highly authentic, beloved by Erskine. Despite everything going for it, the college traditionally has a public persona that is, I think, bizarrely self-effacing. So Clare Hall, as the smallest and poorest college in Oxford and Cambridge, shouldn't really be what we're known for. And I'm not sure it's true. On the contrary, in fact, the Colleges Committee has removed us from the list of 7 poor colleges, and we're no longer eligible for a charitable handout from Trinity every year. I think that's good news in the end. Who wants to invest in a struggling business? And Clare Hall, with its graduate population of 200 or more, compares, with Peterhouse, where I'm Director of Studies in Architecture. We have 65 graduate students. Trinity Hall, 200 odd, and even John's has only 308. Our founders simply omitted, as David said, the customary boarding school for high school leavers tacked on to the serious enterprise. And so, in conclusion, I really hope that my unusually diverse collection of skills and experiences, for a Cambridge professor at least anyway, is going to help unlock those opportunities and negotiate the challenges facing Clare Hall over the next few years. Of course, we have to bring the college back to full consciousness after the pandemic subsides. We've all been working very hard indeed to enable the college to open up in October for our students, visiting academics, and give them all the unique and authentic Cambridge experience. And as David said, I'm very confident that Clare Hall's immediate response last March, which was to allow everybody in residence to stay if they wished and not throw them out, and secure the college and continue to feed everyone at the dizzying level our chefs achieved before lockdown, was by far the most appreciated of all the colleges, Cambridge College's responses. And many of you will have seen the charming film made by our internees to thank the college staff, who really have gone more than the extra mile to make this unprecedented time work surprisingly well. And for them, as for all of us, Clare Hall is a very special place which attracts intense loyalty and affection. And finally, you know that electing a colleague to be head of house is very unusual in Cambridge. It's a sure sign of that very rare phenomenon, a healthy and harmonious governing body, and a college that feels comfortable in itself. And much of that, of course, is David Ibbetson's great achievement, for which we all owe him very profound thanks. And so all that remains for me to do now is to propose a toast to Clare Hall. So raise a glass with me, and to Clare Hall, our college, good health.
Clare Hall.
Clare Hall.